My whole point behind this is that it takes time to build a quote unquote personal brand, but instead of trying to build a personal brand, it's more so about how much value you can add.
All right. Hey guys, we have the amazing Eric Siu here with us. So Eric, I've been following Eric's content for many years from the Growth Everywhere podcast, and now he's the Leveling Up YouTube channel and also the Marketing School podcast with Neil Patel. So Eric Siu is the chairman of Single Grain and also the CEO of ClickFlow. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah. So just to give you a context, I'm interviewing behalf as the head of growth of Next Academy, which is the largest coding and digital marketing academy here in Southeast Asia with over 2,000 students. So this interview will be distributed among entrepreneurs and marketers around Asia, and your content has helped us in a lot of ways when it comes to marketing.
Great, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So going through your content for so many years, recently with you've gone very heavy on videos on YouTube and on LinkedIn and on Facebook as well, on Instagram. So how do you come up with like very interesting content ideas?
Yeah. So what I do, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. So there's a lot of reading that I do. I spend a lot of time reading, whether it's in the morning, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and also looking at a lot of feeds. So Twitter feeds, I follow a lot of different entrepreneurs and VCs. Mm-hmm. And I also look at I save a lot of stuff to Pocket. So I end up reading a lot and I end up listening to a lot. So there's a lot of new stuff that comes in, and I just use myself as a filter to decide what I want to talk about, right? Because there's a lot of people repeating the same content over and over, and that's fine as long as you put it through your lens. You have your own story with it, and then that's how I come up with new content ideas. You're going to never run out of ideas, especially in the digital space where things are changing every single day. So it's endless content.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a bit. So you said you read like the Wall Street Journal and you follow a bit some of the Twitter feeds. So what Twitter feeds do you follow that gives you ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I make my own. I look for people that I think are very smart, very thoughtful, very articulate. So, examples would be, some people, one guy that used to tweet storm all the time, Naval Ravikant's actually a really good example. So he's very smart and articulate with how he tweets. There's other people, there's like writers from the New York Times that are very articulate as well. So, I think writing is a skill, copywriting is a skill. And, those people that can capture my attention, they're marketing well. So I end up, adding them to my own private list.
Do you, as a great marketer yourself, I know that marketing is a constant learning process where every day you discover something new, every day there's new things to learn. And I discovered that, through your content, there are marketers like Sujan Patel, like Noah Kagan. So do you yourself study other marketers?
I used to. I think in the very beginning, if you want to become good at marketing, you play that game. You study other marketers, you interview them, you do things like that. And then I think there's different seasons to business, right? So in the very beginning, I start out as a SEO, and then I start out learning kind of other aspects around marketing. So you're playing at different levels. And now, the game I play more so is not just marketing, but a lot of business, right? So I hang out with a lot of different entrepreneurs. So I end up, it ends up changing, right? I used to hang out with a lot of SEOs, then it was a lot of marketers. Now it's a lot of entrepreneurs. So, sometimes I end up hanging out with, marketers that happen to be great entrepreneurs, and that works out well. But I don't focus so much on the tactics around marketing as much as I used to. Now it's like, okay, if I have a problem, who's the best person that can solve it? And I'll talk to that person.
Yeah, I great stuff. It's more like transitioning from a marketer to entrepreneur, because what I feel being a marketer as well, a lot of marketers are sort of stuck in being a growth hacker. They are stuck in being an SEO specialist or a Google AdWords or paid specialist. And how did you transition from being a sole marketer to now being a full-on entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always had my sights set on not just being kind of to your point, a lot of marketers end up becoming consultants, right? And that's fine. If that's the lifestyle that they want and they're happy with it, that's fine. I think for me, I've talked about the whole thing why there's something called leveling up is because I want to play the next level. What's the next game? What's the next game, right? So I've always had to, if people are playing at such a high level and they're all human beings, why can't I play the same game, right? So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly. Can you repeat the question again? Because
how do marketers transition to an entrepreneur?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how do they try? I mean, the one thing I'll say is this. I think if you're an individual contributor, you're working for a company right now as a marketer, I think you go above and beyond. You do the things that make you indispensable. Because one of the companies I was working at in the past, we had 4-day work weeks. I worked 7 days and I kept spotting new opportunities. And not only did I spot problems, but I provided solutions too, right? So you want to be seen positively in that light. And that naturally is going to make you better and give you more confidence. If the worst case scenario there is you get promoted and you become an executive or like a senior member of the team, that's already great, right? The second thing is it's great for yourself. So if you want to transition to becoming an entrepreneur, I would say, first you become really good at your job if you're working for someone. And then sure, you can go off and, become a consultant for a little bit. Then you're starting to become, you're in that sense, you are an entrepreneur, right? You're working for yourself. Then it's like, okay, you become so good at what you do that you need to think about, okay, I'm doing too much right now. Okay, who can solve my problems, right? So you start to recruit people, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you have a business, you have an agency. That's great, right? But the next thing I would say is agency to me is another stepping stone, right? I don't think you stop there. Sure, you can stop there if you're having fun with it. I have fun with it, but I want the next thing, right? So it's a lot of studying. So the way I learned. I have how did I learn podcasts, right? A lot of reading, a lot of studying, right? That's how I did it. How did I learn software as a service? Well, I ended up working for a subscription company first, learned a lot about metrics, how it all works. And then I combined that knowledge with my marketing knowledge to make the software that we have, which is called ClickFlow. How do you do a book? Okay, you learn about it, you talk to people too, right? But it's if there's one constant theme, it's constantly trying to get better and it's constantly trying to learn. And the level that you learn and you get better helps you elevate to the level that you deserve to be at. That's all.
Yeah. I have a more specific question. So that's awesome. And I see your growth transitioning from, being a head of growth to owning your own agency and now doing SaaS. So I think that a lot of marketers are stuck in the tactics. I think like what you said, stuck in the tactics, stuck in, what is the biggest SEO hack? What is the biggest marketing hack? So, but how do they transition from, okay, I want all this marketing, but I also want to own my own thing, because as marketers, we always start working for somebody else, growing other people's businesses. So what was the change for you?
Yeah, I think it's looking at, this again comes back to learning again, but there's a couple books I'll recommend. I mean, there's one called, the first book I'd recommend is probably a very simple one called Traction, which is the Entrepreneur's Operating System. That's for people that are at least, consultants. And then, it all comes down to planning, right? What's my long-term vision? There's another book called Vivid Vision, which if you see my videos, you probably see me talk about, but it's about setting, okay, what's your 3-year vision out? And you write it out. I wrote my vision out. It's 1,500 words, right? It's like, okay, what do you want to happen in 3 years? But also like, then you come down to the tactics, like, what are you going to do? But a lot of people, they read these blog posts or listen to podcasts and here's the newest tactic. They go try the newest tactics, but there's no strategy for the long term. They don't think about the 3-year plan, and they don't think about their big, hairy, audacious goal, also known as a BHAG, which is 10 to 25 years out. And so for me, like, this whole leveling up thing is I want to just continue to build audience, and then I'll buy businesses or build businesses under it, and I'll just continue to build audience. But you have to have like a big, hairy, audacious goal. Like one of mine is, the big one right now is, working with companies that will positively impact 40 million people, right? And positively impact is important because you don't want to work with shady companies. So that is all encompassing. I can educate people. I can work with companies. 40 million is a good number. And that cascades over into, revenue goals too, right? But if you don't think that far ahead, you got to look at like how billionaires think, right? It's, they think very long-term. They read a lot. They spend a lot of time. It's like, okay, it's the habits that make them who they are, and they just keep repeating the habits, and then eventually they become like a runaway success. And runaway success to me is just comparing yourself against average numbers, and if you're much better than the average, then you're a runaway success.
Yeah, good, great stuff. So as a as what I hear, you're trying at the moment trying to build your audience, through the podcast, the Marketing School podcast, which gets you a lot of probably the number one marketing podcast right now. And also with your leveling up videos, you're trying to build an audience, right? So you're trying to build an audience to impact 40 million people. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
And the end goal is to have following, to have a company that impacts people.
Yep. So the whole thing behind that, when I say impact, is you want, sure, like we already have like 30 plus million or so like listens, so we've impacted them in that way, right? But when I said 40 million, it's people that actually pay at least like $1. So that's what I mean by impact, right? They're at least taking out their wallet to say, hey, look, we trust what you do. And then they're spending a little money. Because when you actually pay for education, just like you actually respect it. If it's all free, you don't respect it as much, which is why online education kind of, completion rates are so low. So yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. Just going back to your question, the whole thing behind building an audience, I fundamentally believe that if you build the audience first, building the business becomes infinitely easier, because the audience to me is actually harder to do. A lot of people build the business first and then there's no audience and they have no moat around them. But if you have an audience, you have a moat that you can kind of defend no matter what comes at you.
Great stuff. And everyone should build that audience. And I really admire you doing your podcast for so many years. I listened to your interviews, interviewing entrepreneurs to Growth Everywhere podcast. I used to listen to it when it was on YouTube only, when it was just a JPEG on YouTube. And now you've transitioned to, like a full-on podcast and mixing up with leveling up. So I think you took maybe 4 years to build up a personal brand and around there. So what are your tips when it comes to building a personal brand as a marketer?
Yeah, actually, so I do the podcast with another marketer named Neil Patel, and we actually did an episode the other day on how long it takes to become successful in business, not just a personal brand, but business in general. And I didn't even tell him what I thought my answer was, but he answered with the same answer. It's basically, it takes 3 years to start to build anything successful. And, the first 2 years, you're kind of slogging out. Sometimes you figure it out faster, but it's really in year 3 where things start to grow. So if I look at, Single Grain, it wasn't until year 3 after I took the company over, the agency, where it started to grow, right? Where I started to figure it out. ClickFlow, our software company, we're figuring out faster, but it's really been like 1.5 years or so since we had the product out, but it's starting to really move a lot faster. Even with Marketing School, if you look at from a financial perspective, we didn't start to take money. Even though we get $1 million a month, we didn't start to take advertising until recently. So all of it comes down to 3 years. And when I think about Growth Everywhere or Leveling Up, the podcast now, you know the story already, but the first year I was only getting 9 downloads a day, and I was spending 6 hours a week on it. After the second year, I was spending 6 hours a week again. I was only getting 30 downloads a day. So again, I was failing, and most people would give up. But after that, now that podcast gets up to about 100,000 downloads a month. And believe it or not, even though Marketing School gets $1 million a month, when people say I listen to your podcast, I often ask them, like, what do you listen to? And 50-50, it's either my own podcast or Marketing School. So it's Leveling Up or Marketing School. So my whole point behind this is that it takes time to build a quote unquote personal brand, but instead of trying to build a personal brand, it's more so about how much value you can add. And that's why for me, like, it's always about learning and then trying to articulate what I've learned. And that way it kind of reinforces it in my head. So, sure, it builds the audience. I get better. And then people also get better around the world. So it's a win across the board. And I just think, for me, as an introvert, I never really didn't want to speak, didn't want to do all this other stuff that I'm doing right now. But again, you get to play at the level that your training has brought you to. And that's just the level I'm playing at right now, which is, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I'm just saying, like, hey, like, if you keep doing it, you'll get to where you want to go. Yeah.
Persistence is key. Am I right to say, because I regularly consume your content, that your content is going in the direction where it's more, how to say in a word, more generic in a way, more personal growth rather than marketing specific? Because I think earlier your content was more like 7 SEO tips, top 5 SEO tools, and recently you have like 7 figures as a marketer, how to earn 6 figures, and how to grow your personal brand and content like that?
Yeah, so we're adjusting it right now. I'm letting the videographer on our team kind of come up with the topics, and we're giving it a try. But we're testing a lot on YouTube, right? Before we only did like 3-minute videos, 4-minute videos. Now we do 10 minutes because it increases the watch time. So we're testing a lot of things. My whole thing long term though is I want to have kind of more advanced content. When I say that, you look at like a Bloomberg, for example. Bloomberg, the type of people that's consuming Bloomberg's content, like technology news and that type of stuff, is very affluent people, right? Right now, it's very generic. So we're constantly optimizing it, to your point. So right now, I would just say it's a work in progress. But, but even recently, we've started doing these teardown videos, like, how Slack does marketing. And those are really easy and fun for me to do. So we might do more of those. Right now, I would just say, I don't know. And we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, great stuff. I really appreciate your content, and I hope to see more stuff come up from you. So I think when it comes to content, right? Because I think everything surrounds content, and I really like your concept of a content sprout, or you call it content spoke. So it's creating a bunch of content that's related to each other. So how do you create like sort of a content spoke for your agency?
Yeah. So what I would say, we like starting with video, even like what we're doing right now, because video instantly becomes audio. And then, we have a lot of different tidbits from this interview where you ask a specific question. So maybe you might end up asking me like, I don't know, 10 or 15 questions or so, but those 15 can become separate audio files too, right? So one video can become multiple pieces of content. That might become, 16 pieces right there, adding audio. And then you might make this one interview into a written blog post, right? So this could easily become like a, 1,500 to 2,000 word piece. And then you promote it afterwards to the different social channels. Those all require different postings. You can take snippets from this piece, like, maybe 30-second segments, and then have someone chop it up. But the whole plan, the whole idea behind this is that people's attention is so split nowadays that you almost have to be attacking different channels. When I go to Japan, people that consume my content, they only look at YouTube, right? Now, when I'm in other areas, it's their behavior is different, right? So this video itself, you chop it up, you can throw it on LinkedIn, you can throw it on Instagram TV. You just got to edit it a little bit. So the key here is once you start you're confident with your content, things are starting to move on one channel, then you can start to expand into other channels. I wouldn't try to do everything at once. Hit one, start doing it well, and then start to expand. And then, as you start to bring in more revenue, think about, building your team around, you need some editors around this, like video editors, you need audio editors, you need social media editors, all that kind of stuff, right? And then it starts to scale out, because some of the best people in the world, they've got teams of like 30 to 40 people. You don't need to do that, but it's still helpful to have people helping you.
Great stuff. So down, I really appreciate your time. So down to the last question. So one of the things I always tell my students that I learned from you, but I'm not sure if it's from you, but you have said in your videos, be a T-shaped marketer. Basically, find one thing, that is SEO or paid advertising, and be very deep in that, but know how everything works together. Like from your landing page optimization to ads to videos, how it works together. So how does someone or a marketer get better at strategy? Basically, the T-shaped, what I see, the T is actually strategy. So what are your thoughts on that?
So your question is, how do you become a T-shaped marketer?
Yeah. How to be better at strategy. I think the T is more of a strategy.
Yeah. So I think if you want to become better at strategy, I think there's, McKinsey, even though they're a consulting firm, they have a lot of good pieces on strategy. I would say you have to understand the difference between strategies and tactics. And I was actually just reading something the other day. Strategy is what really the unique actions a company has that make them who they are, right? So, Southwest, even though price is one of them, but they also their strategy is, more frequent flights, right? They get off really quickly. So Southwest Airlines, United States, they're number one cheap kind of airline here, and a strategy for like a company might be 3 to 5 things that make up who they are. So you have to think about for yourself, like what are the unique differentiators for yourself, and then the tactics are what help you end up kind of achieving the strategic goal for you in the long term. So what I would say is if you want to become good at strategy, you have to go back again to the actually spend some time reading up on strategy too, and learning about strategy, because in the early days, what I did was and I'm pretty sure other marketers were doing this, was they were spending too much time reading blog posts and trying a tactic, trying the next tactic, and then the next tactic. I would always try the next tactic. I was always add the newest tool, and then you start getting overwhelmed. But then because you didn't spend, maybe 20% of your time thinking, you end up falling behind, and you end up becoming like most people. And if that's what you're okay with, great. But I don't think you listen to this to become most people.
Yeah.
So the thing I would say is, you have to spend, if you can. I know maybe if you're learning right now, you're just getting started in your career. Maybe maybe 95% of the time, 90 to 95% of the time, you're doing stuff, but maybe 5 to 10% of the time, you are actually thinking, right? And then the more successful you become, for me now, and I know a lot of other people, they will block out entire days where they can just think, right? So Fridays are usually my strategic days, where I'll usually block out the entire day just to think about things. And most of the time, I might get like 1 or 2 takeaways, but that's worth the time that I spent on it. So having that free space to think about things strategically is going to help you. And it takes planning too, to eventually know where you want to go.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Eric. I think we can end here. I look forward to more content of you. So to all my listeners, please subscribe to the Marketing Schools podcast, and also Leveling Up on YouTube, and also on the podcast as well. So Eric, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.